there's a lot of complaining in international events that NA doesn't have their own identity or we're not willing to innovate. And then when people innovate, like, you shouldn't be bashed. Of course, there are different people that had different opinions on the internet, but I think as a whole, new strategies should be encouraged.
So second day of week 5 of NA LCS. I'm joined right now by Bjergsen himself to talk a little bit about how things are going with TSM. Coverage, of course, presented by OmniSlash. Bjergsen, how are things going with TSM? I feel like you guys are under the radar. Normally, everyone's like TSM, TSM, TSM. But this split, it seems like you guys are kind of doing your thing.
Doing our thing, but not very well, I would say. I mean, we definitely have some struggles, and yeah, it just feels like we are trying to figure out exactly how we want to play the game, or not as much how we want to play the game, but just how we want to come to that conclusion in the game and execute that as a team. There's a lot of voices, and there's a lot of overthinking in the game rather than just simplifying it and getting shit done. Yeah. So it's kind of what we're struggling with, yeah.
It seems like everyone is struggling, though. It's not just you guys. It seems like I cannot think of a team where I'm like, that's a good team right now.
Yeah, I think it also is with the meta, because usually if the meta is really stable, your macro doesn't have to be as good because you're playing these champions like, okay, we know how this matchup works and this champion to this champion, but there's so much variety in what you can pick and play that you have to be better at adapting in the draft, adapting within the game based on how lanes are going, or maybe playing against something you aren't used to, or playing something that you haven't practiced as much. So you need to have a better foundation so that you can play different champions and still be able to come to a good conclusion on how to play the game.
Speaking of all the teams learning the meta, I just interviewed Double F2. He said he was feeling frustrated because the community seems to, like, he was looking at CLG's game against them, their draft. He thought that draft was really interesting, and he was really frustrated to see the community just like kind of yell at CLG because they tried something unconventional. Yeah. Do you have that same sense? Is it hard for teams to try non-conventional stuff right now because there's like this weird backlash, or it's just like they get flamed if they lose?
I think the backlash is stupid because there's a lot of complaining in international events that NA doesn't have their own identity or we're not willing to innovate. And then when people innovate, like, you shouldn't be bashed. Of course, there are different people that had different opinions on the internet, but I think as a whole, new strategies should be encouraged. Like, we pulled out the Talia funnel and failed horribly. I mean, we had a good early game, but we weren't able to close out. And I think that's something we should do. We should try something new that we thought could work and see if we can execute it. Same with CLG. They did an even crazier strategy. And they just weren't able to execute. I think in their heads, I could see how it makes sense. There isn't really anyone that Nocturne can kill in the game. And Nocturne is a very high priority champion, but honestly, I would like to see more of people bringing out new things and not just copying what they see from other teams or what they see from Korea. Yeah.
Good innovation for the region, I guess.
Yeah, I think so, because there are obviously things in NA that people have tried or have seen in solo queue that is late to pop up in other regions. Like Wukong has been a really popular pick, and Capsule's kind of the first one to pull it out in EU, but that's a pick I could have seen coming in NA also.
Speaking of that, kind of the opposite, we've seen stuff pop up in other regions, and I feel like in North America we've seen people afraid to pull it out, like Heimerdinger. And I've heard Sven hates the idea of having to play Heimerdinger, or just like, he just wants to play the 80 carries, right? And we got Definitely over there. Definitely said Xpecial forced him to do it. Xpecial is like position coach. So do you think that there is like a bit of hesitancy in North America beside like in picking these champions that we've seen elsewhere?
I don't know. Did Sven tell you recently that he didn't like playing them, or are you talking about his initial tweet from like back when?
Yeah, back when it happened, and I think Mithy said it in an interview. The sense I get is that Sven just like does not want to play other shit like this.
Oh, he actually really enjoys it, I think. He really enjoys playing the mages. I mean, obviously the Heimerdinger didn't work out well for us, and I think it's a champion that you have to play well around and you have to snowball well. And also we were having a little bit of trouble on kind of fitting it into the draft, because the game we played it, we had a lot of magic damage champions, no champion that could kill Mundo, and eventually we just got run over by the Dr. Mundo. But I mean, I think we have seen a lot of people trying out stuff like Heimerdinger and trying things in other regions that work, including us, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't. But I think every team should be open to experimenting, especially in this meta. You can't just say, kind of, this is our style and this is how we're going to draft every game, because the meta is so crazy and it's changing rapidly at the same time.
What is your take on this? I don't want to go too much past this weekend on it, but I still think that the conversation around solo queue, NA solo queue, players getting the right practice. Like,
Is this you trying to get your quote for the Reddit thread?
no, you already gave me the quote. That's the innovation thing where like people should do that.
Right.
Don't worry, I got it.
Every title for any interview on Reddit right now is about NA solo queue, ping, bad quality, bad environment.
Here's the problem. The storylines in NA are fucked right now. So somebody like me trying to cover it, like, who are we? Like, it's not like Echo Fox is going undefeated. It's like, who's going to take down Echo Fox? It's like, all the games are coin flips. Who knows what's going to happen? Teams like Team Liquid look like amazing at one point in time and like the worst team in the world the next. What am I supposed to do with that? Like, what questions do you ask about everything so fluky? But I do think it is a good conversation to have, right? Like, if North America is sucking so much and the players think they can't get good practice, that seems like something to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. I think, or there are being looked into options on how we can get something like that set up. At Realma, we can plan trying to figure out, is it just going to be LCS and Academy players, or are we going to bring in Challenger or Masters or Diamond players? You know, how inclusive is it going to be? Obviously on a lower ping based in LA. But I think it's a mix of all those things that people are bringing up. It's not just the ping. It's not just the not so serious environment or the not having as many players that are striving to be the best, but rather striving to just get really high elo or be a streamer or be known for being a troll.
For fun region, yes.
Or being, a toxic guy and build a following from that. I think that's more so a thing in NA and other regions, but there's also the player base, and I think all of these are just small symptoms of that ends up showing the big problem, which is, I guess, how people feel about NA solo queue.
Would it be ironic to you because let's say the situation does get solved, there's some sort of tournament realm or some sort of tool that allows players to practice at high level, and this whole conversation started because EU players came over here and shit-talked NA solo queue. So wouldn't it be great if they, talking about it, forced a conversation that ended up getting North America better because they came over here to complain?
Yeah, sure. But I think also it would benefit EU if NA is better and having more competition, because right now I don't think EU is feeling too threatened by NA as a whole. And I do still think that the biggest problem is probably the player base, more so than the ping and solo queue or the environment. Because if there aren't more players that are also going to be more serious players and more tryhard players and more of every category of player, and just that league is not as popular in North America as it is in other places in the world is a big issue, I think. Sure.
All right. Trying to think if there's what's going on behind the scenes at TSM. You guys doing anything cool or interesting these days?
No. We're just trying not to suck and not doing super great at that. Okay. So a lot of practicing and a lot of, also spending a little time outside the game to make sure that we're not only spending time in a really high stress environment where we're pushing each other.
That's what I'm talking about. Are you doing stuff like that?
No, we're not really. But it's just the occasional team dinner or just hanging out and kind of talking as friends rather than in a work environment as teammates, because it does get personal and we have a lot of arguments and discussions because that's how it's supposed to be, and I guess how it always is in the TSM environment. So it's good to kind of come back down to earth sometimes.
Does that ever hold you back? Because I've talked to other players who have left and they're sort of like, it is intense on TSM. Like, everyone is holding each other to such a high standard, and sometimes they're doing it in a very intense way.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to it. It also is just TSM's kind of legacy. And one of my teammates told me recently that he does feel that kind of pressure, like carrying the TSM legacy, whereas I don't feel it as much because I've been here for so long. But I can imagine if I was to come into another really successful team, if I was to move to G2, for example, and then I'm carrying their legacy rather than something I built myself, and that specific teammate felt more relief from winning rather than happy from winning. And obviously it feels really crap to lose. Yeah. So that's also kind of a mentality thing that we're trying to tackle, because we should be playing for ourselves as the 5 players, not our name, not our TSM, or not the past of the success that we've had. Obviously that will weigh on me, but ideally I wouldn't want that weighing on how my teammates are playing, practicing, and ultimately how we commit to stuff on stage, because I don't think we're just committing to fights as much. Today we were more willing to just fight whenever we had the chance, but it's not something I felt in the last 2 weeks. Yeah.
Anything that you would say to any of the TSM fans out there?
Just thank you to all the loyal fans that support us. It's always nice there's a lot of negative things out on the internet, so when I come here to LCS and I meet the fans that support us, if we win or lose, regardless of roster changes and all these things, I think meeting fans face to face and kind of getting what's it called? Getting like a reality check as to who is following us and who our fans are, because it can be really easy to get caught up in all the toxic comments. So it's nice to meet the loyal fans here and the fans that write me nice messages on Twitter and my stream and things like that. So.
Hey, thank you so much for the interview, Soren. Best of luck. Looking forward to seeing how TSM does the rest of the split. For everyone else, you can check out the rest of my coverage of all things esports right here on my YouTube channel. I want to thank OmniSlash so much for the support of my content. They are on a train right now, a train that you could be on, and that's the Travis train. Just get on that train, subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit up my Twitch. We're stopping at all the different stops, all right? This is a train, and it's going far. So get on the train and ride it. Ride that Travis train.